Okay, good evening. It is Thursday, October 28th. It is 6:08 p.m. and this is the Easthampton Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. All right, so until we have a couple more members, I'm going to skip the minutes. So update, we submitted our application to CHAPA for the Municipal Engagement Initiative today. Thank you to Jamie for helping me, and I think it was a good application. I think we had very compelling reasons why we should get accepted. So we had letters of support from the planning office and from the mayor's office, and I got an email back from Dana that it is complete. So I don't have a good sense of the time frame in terms of when we'll know, and it obviously depends on how many applications they receive, which we have no idea. So we'll keep you posted, but I'm happy it's done.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jen.
I couldn't remember if I was muted or not, so I was like, okay, you're on a weird screen. It's like little. I was like, okay.
Just want to say for the record, thank you, Jenna, for putting that application together. I thought you did a great job.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was really, really helpful. So thank you.
Well, Jamie added a lot of good comments and dates and added some things that I totally forgot about. So it was a good team effort and got the support letters for us. So
I looked at it while I was in the waiting room, and it looks great. And I'm sorry that I did not. It was one of those weeks, but it looks great. I mean, it was really very well written, and thank you so much for putting that together.
Luckily, we had some already well-written things in other documents, so I didn't have to rewrite. You know, you don't reinvent the wheel. If you already have a great description of Easthampton in the housing production plan, that's what you use, right? Like, so.
Oh, that makes, yeah, I was like, this is really good. Okay.
Yeah, like I didn't have all that stuff at my fingertips. I was like, what's have we written recently that I could use?
I actually feel a little better because I was like, this is really good. Not that you couldn't write something really good, but I was just like, oh, this is like really good.
Yeah, no. So yeah, I'm glad that's out of the way. So we could talk about housing trust because is that a decision? Sort of a decision. Okay. It's like ish. So you may recall, Kate, at our last meeting, we talked about the request to the housing partnership to investigate the housing trust. And we had a conversation where we basically were going to send back to the city council and the mayor, like, we don't have the capacity to do this. And Jamie raised some concerns about if we don't participate in the process could go on without us. And do we really want that to happen? So I met with Jeff and Jamie after our last meeting to talk about the Municipal Engagement Initiative application. And Jeff had the opportunity to watch our last meeting and also shared the same concern that if we sort of say, go forth without us, that in fact that could happen. And maybe we really do want to have some sort of seat at the table. So I offered to reach out to Shelley at Mass Housing Partnership, who's the person who does their technical assistance on affordable housing trusts, just to see what MHP does do in terms of technical support, so that we could at least offer something back to City Council and to the mayor's office. And Jamie and I had a conversation with Shelley today, which was actually really helpful. And so we went through sort of like what the pros and cons are, what our questions are, why the housing partnership itself does not feel like we have the capacity to like do this and like create this for the city. I mean, and I think she, we were asking all the right questions. So she was very like supportive in that like we are asking the right questions. We are thinking the right things to make sure that like this would be a good step for Easthampton. And we talked about things like capacity and professional support and how do you fund it and who's on it and how do you make those decisions. So what she has done for other communities is she does like a Trust 101 training that kind of goes through the basics of the statute best practices, some examples of other trusts and other communities, and then some information about how to start it, like what would you do first, what are eligible activities, and she could do that for us, for Easthampton. So she could do that for city council, the mayor, the housing partnership members, CPA, because it really affects CPA in a lot of ways. And, you know, we then could determine like what's the next step. So Jamie and I talked about like our recommendation back to city council and the mayor's office to kind of close this loop of their request to us, you know, could be, you know, the housing partnership doesn't have the capacity to take this issue on. We could advise on it. And we also suggest that we have Shelley from MHP come and do this presentation as a first step to learn more about, you know, what are the things that we should be thinking of? Because I think we have been concerned, or I personally have been concerned that maybe everybody involved is not thinking about all these questions and just thinking like, great, write the ordinance. Now we've got a trust, we're all set. And so I think this could bring to light some of those other critical pieces that we want people to think about, and would also then sort of, we close the loop by saying, we looked into it, here's what we recommend, but we're not offering to do it. And then, you know, I don't want me to put words in your mouth, Jamie, but Jamie's response was like, and then the mayor can decide that she wants to do it and make that happen, right? So like, we don't have to make it happen, but we could give them the information. And then if the mayor or city council or whatever says, nope, this is the thing we're going to do, then it's up to them to figure out how they have the professional capacity to do that.
I think that's brilliant. I think if we actually looked back at the video from last time, I think when Jamie said that, I said, let the mayor roll the dice and let her go for it. I think this is a much more mature and professional way of and more responsible from the partnership to, I think that sounds like a really good idea. And I think actually, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it might be helpful. I don't know. I mean, we can't vote on this, but one question that I have, and Jamie, I guess you could opine about this, is would it be helpful to, I don't really think it's necessary, but would it be helpful for the housing partnership to actually take a vote, aside from not having the capacity, but actually opine on if we think, should we write something or say something about why we don't think that this is a great idea, or should we just let the city council and the mayor decide why they do or they don't, and find the resources? So that is a question that I have that I know we can't decide, but we could discuss.
Yeah, I guess I would opine that, you know, it's within the housing partnership's right to say we do or we don't think that this is good for the city. But I would encourage you to go further than that and just like lay out, here are the reasons why we think this could be great for the city. Here's the reasons why we think we have reservations about wholeheartedly endorsing it, and going and just sort of like laying it out, sort of like the pros and the cons. So that way, you know, when the mayor and the city council receive this recommendation, they have an opportunity to understand why, and not just what the answer was, but that also there's the why for how did the housing partnership decide that this was, you know, not the best way to go about it, if that's the way the housing partnership still feels. But I think that, you know, in the conversation we had with Shelley today, it seemed like some of the concerns of the partnership could be alleviated just by working with Mass Housing Partnership. And if the housing partnership was not taking the lead on creating it, but was instead, it came from the mayor's office, and she directed her administrative, like, you know, she said to Jeff, make this happen, and Jeff, you know, Jeff would find the time to make it happen. Or if the city council decides that it's something that they want to spend the time on, then they'll make it happen. But we're not sort of getting cut out, or that the partnership is not getting cut out of the process.
And we're not making it happen. Like, we're not saying we'll make it happen. We're saying, here's the tools for you to make it happen. Jackie, just to catch you up, we, after our last conversation about the trust, Jeff and Jamie and I met to talk about the municipal engagement initiative application. And Jeff sort of shared the same concerns that Jamie had, that if we tell the city council and the mayor, like, we're not doing the trust, that they could go on and do it without us. And like, is that what we really want? So Jamie and I had a conversation with Shelley Gearing from MHP today to get some sense of like what technical support MHP could offer us about the trust. And she can do a trust 101 training for the city council, CPA, the mayor, us, the planning department, to really walk through all the different steps. And then, so what we were discussing is that to close the loop back to Councilor Peak and the mayor, the housing partnership could say, we are recommending that, we don't have the capacity to take this on as a project, but we are recommending that we have Shelley come and do this training, and then, really lay out all the different pieces of a trust, and then, as a whole, make a decision about, how the city wants to move forward. So.
And I don't get the sense that it's a done deal, that that's absolutely the way that folks are headed, just if that's helpful to know.
About the trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's pros and cons, and we talked a little bit about some of those pros and cons with Shelley. I mean, I guess I don't necessarily hate the idea. I just don't want to trust just so that we can say we have a trust. I think we have to be really thoughtful about it. And I just think we don't have the capacity to as a group, there's only 3 of us here, like, to do that, to spearhead that conversation. So, but I do think that, we can at least give them the knowledge, and then like that is, the mayor could decide to make it a priority or, not.
And I think that would actually just be helpful. Do you all imagine us kind of all going through that process together, so that it would be housing partnership and city council members who are interested and the mayor? Because I think that's a great way to just think through whether, what are the pros and cons of trying to do it in a community like ours? And that will bring a lot of clarity, I think, about whether it makes sense. And Kate's shared with us before some things that she thinks don't work super well. I had a brief conversation with the mayor, and I think she sees what the drawbacks could potentially be with a housing trust. And I think, some of the city councilors just don't have as much of a, like the scope of what it entails and what could work and what could potentially be problematic. So that would at least help us to have complete information, which would be a good thing.
I think it would be together, like obviously probably via Zoom, but it would be like one training where we're all together hearing the information together, which I think would also be really helpful. So to circle back, Kate, to your question, do we want in this same response that we write to the city council and to the mayor to give some pros and cons to why the housing partnership isn't, or do we just want to say like, we don't have the capacity to take this on as an activity, here's what we recommend. We would like to participate in the conversation or something.
I think it kind of almost more depends if you really wanted to, I don't know enough of the personalities. I think somewhat it depends on I hate to say it, but a little bit the personalities of Councilor Peak and the mayor, right? So some people are better, they want to come to the same conclusion. I'm not, I'm not enough of a trust expert to be like, I can say the reasons why I object, but so I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's a huge deal one way or another, but I think it would probably be helpful. Again, for me, if anything, I think it's just it's not my resources, but to me, it does seem like a resource thing. If you got a ton of resources, sure, go for it. But it's really like what's the benefit? It's a lot of resources.
People resources?
People resources. Mhm.
Okay. What's another con?
Well, I think the benefit part that, like, if you're in, and I always forget the name of it. It's not inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, I
When you
think it is. Yeah.
Is it inclusionary
So
zoning?
it's
when you
like how to fund the trust, like a funding mechanism for the trust.
yeah, that's going to be a regular, like, yeah, then that makes sense. But to create something in my mind when you don't have the end in mind exactly, like you don't know what your funding source is going to be, your frequent funding source, to what end? That's a lot of resources for something that might not help us at all.
Does anyone have a pro that they'd like to throw out?
Yeah, I will. I'm a guest, but when we established the Municipal Housing Trust in Amherst, it was at a time when we still had town meeting, and it was a way to dump particularly CPA money into a source that the housing advocates could use during the course of the year without having to go back to town meeting. Now, you have a rolling kind of CPA thing in Easthampton, so I think that's not so much of an advantage to you, but it is a place that you could build potentially up a larger kitty without having to renegotiate every single thing with CPA. And if the city council trusts the housing trust to behave, responsibly, then it's one of the pluses is you can accumulate money in a fund like that.
Yeah, and just to build on what Peter said, it gives us an opportunity to have money to act quickly if an opportunity comes up. So if that's our only goal, like, is there another way to do that besides having to establish a trust, right? And I think that's always been like the back and forth thing. So.
Well, and I think it's also worth mentioning in that how our CPA functions in terms of like do we have a rigid CPA and I think we have actually a relatively flexible CPA
At the moment.
At the moment, yeah. So one of the pros could be, do we really need this? One of the cons could be, let's say CPA really changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think one of the pros of doing it now is that we have this group of people who are really interested, right? Which we know hasn't always been the case. So if we say we wait, and then 10 years from now, we're like, wow, we really want it, and we don't have a CPA committee that's supportive or a city council that's supportive, then we've missed the opportunity. So that for me is a pro of why this is coming at a good time, is like people want to talk about it rather than before when nobody wanted to talk about it. Okay.
And I want to just point, the pro of being able to act quickly is, a really big deal for even when the CPA and the city council move as quickly as they possibly can. It still takes on the order of 2 months for any appropriation to be approved, and that in a tight housing market, if we have an opportunity to secure an option agreement to purchase land to build housing like that, the seller may not be waiting that long, and those we have missed opportunities like that more than once in the past couple of years. So,
which also, I mean, I haven't read that How to Establish a Housing Trust booklet in a really long time. But my understanding is, I mean, it could still be the case that we still don't get to act as quickly as we want. It depends on how we set it up. But
yeah, because one of the things that Shelley talked about today is that, depending on the makeup of the board can influence how much trust the city council and the mayor give to the board to act, whether or not it includes members of the city council or whether or not the mayor sits on it herself or has a representative sitting on it, and just the powers that you can grant when you set up the trust, whether or not the trust can do bonding on its own or has to go to city council for bonding, or whether or not certain appropriations over a certain amount would need to come back to the mayor or the city council for approval, can all be sort of negotiated when the ordinance is created. So you're right. If there's too much restrictions put onto the trust, then it's not the quick, nimble thing. And then what is the benefit?
Yeah, and obviously the other thing that everyone pointed out, like if there isn't a income stream that continues, what's the point? So.
Right. And I do think that that's a really important discussion to have while this is the process going on, but we don't have an inclusionary zoning ordinance right now. But if it was identified that that was going to be a significant funding stream, then the group that's set up with doing the housing trust would also be tasked with maybe creating an inclusionary housing ordinance, inclusionary housing zoning ordinance to then fund it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm happy to draft a response on behalf of the partnership, sort of stating, that we don't have the capacity to take this on. We recommend that we, ask MHP to come do a workshop for us, and also lay out here's some important things that we've been thinking about that we think, everyone should think about. What's the goal, right? Like, why do we want to do this? And then here's some pros and here's some cons that the housing partnership has discussed, and just lay it out. And then
and maybe I missed something, but have we been asked this specifically? Are we responding to a question we've gotten from the mayor or the city council specifically?
Well, I think back in June, that's what that meeting was with Councilor Peak and the mayor was like. I think we had sort of said to Councilor Peak, we would get back to him about this. And so the deadline was in September. And obviously he hasn't responded.
He's been a little busy.
Yeah, he's not wondering what's going on. But I think just to close the loop, to say we thought about it, here's what we did, and then kind of put it back on them. To say, yes, I guess they could say, yes, housing partnership, please set this up with Shelley, or they could say, yes, planning department, please set this up with, I guess we could figure out who are they getting responding to, if they want to move forward. Would it be the planning department or us?
I assume at that point they would take the memo and figure out if,
Figure it out. Okay.
Because it could be the city councilors could decide that they want to take it on. They have an ordinance subcommittee, and it's something they could do. They could meet and decide that that's what they want to do. I think they may have asked for the housing partnership to. It was unclear exactly what the ask was, but they definitely wanted the housing partnership's advice on it. Maybe if the housing partnership had been interested in taking it on, then they would gladly accepted that. But I guess just a final thought about pros or cons is just how things to consider would be the role of the housing partnership once there is a housing trust. We did hear from Shelley that there are a number of communities that do have both housing partnerships and housing trusts, and they have a bunch of different configurations for the roles of each group and how they interact with each other.
Okay. Great. So then we'll just be done with this and we can move on. All right. So now we have a quorum. Brad is not here, and we have a new member, and she's unfortunately not here. So that's too bad. So next on the agenda, because Peter is here, is just an update. Valley CDC has been doing some more thinking since our last meeting about their CPA request. And so I think Peter has some thoughts that he wants to share.
Sure, and thanks, Jana, and Jana and Jamie and I spoke briefly before the meeting a little bit. So let me be clear that our major goal is to have a program that benefits Easthampton residents who who can benefit from the services that we offer around acquiring buying homes, or really around community housing. So the first time we came with a proposal that was very large for 4 $50,000 subsidies. Next, we came back saying, okay, we're just going to do counseling. Then we had some concerns in the office about whether or not just the counseling piece would be something that the CPA committee would approve of. And we did a little bit of research into that. And it seems as though there are plenty of examples, but where it's been done around the Commonwealth. But CPA committees can be mercurial, and they don't necessarily obey what other communities do, and they're not bound by that. So we were thinking what we want is a program that is effective and accomplishes something that's tangible that we can point to and say, hey, we produced these particular results. So Donna and I talked it over. We included some other people on our staff in that discussion. And so the latest thinking from our end is to do a program that has 3 $25,000 subsidies and includes all the counseling that we did the last time. The theory would be that during the course of doing that counseling for 45 Easthampton residents, we would discover 3 that could benefit from the mortgage subsidy, and we would see them through the process of acquiring their first home. We're not attached to this at all. We'd be perfectly fine scaling it back to the proposal where we just do the first time home buyer counseling, and the Easthampton helps share the cost of that program with us. It's not that we oppose that. We believe that does it performs a great service. Our concern was that CPA might not see it like that. So I think we would take our lead. We want something that you guys can stand quite firmly behind, I think, as the the housing partnership, something that you can feel like, yeah, we really would support this effort. I think that's probably more important to us than what our recommendation might be. So as I say, we're not attached to one proposal or the other. This was just sort of our latest thinking. What we want to do is we want to get it right rather than get it done now. So I'd be delighted to have feedback from you folks who know your community, probably certainly better than I do, and probably better than we do at Valley, although we've had a fair amount of experience working in Easthampton, but I would take my lead from you all. And happy to answer any questions. Donna couldn't be here tonight, but we had a long discussion about it today, so I think I'm pretty up to speed with what our thinking on this is. But as I say, I'd be happy to, really kick it around. And as I say, we want something that you guys feel most strongly supportive of, and then we'll propose that to the CPA and hope that they also find it supportive.
Peter, I'll just jump in. I think that the biggest concern about the money program right now, or the homeownership program, is would we be setting people up for an upside down loan at some point when the market comes down a bit? And so I think that would be, I don't know the market well enough, but I think that would be a little concern.
A fair question. Our experience with most of these programs have been that that first-time home buyers who use a subsidy like this end up staying in the homes significantly longer than most people do, and the upside down nature of it, they're able to weather that because nothing changes for them. If the market drops a bit and then creeps back up in another 5 years, it's generally not a huge problem. Not to say that somebody who immediately wanted to get out of their house 2 years for some reason, and it could happen. There is some danger to that, Kate. I wouldn't deny that, but I think our experience has been that most people who benefit from these kind of programs end up staying in their homes for longer than the average.
I love the down payment. Well, I love the first time home buyer counseling stuff and all the financial stuff. And I taught the first time home buyer class for Valley for a while, about 18 years ago. So I really love that piece. And I think it's super helpful in getting people to understand what they need to do to buy a house and getting people to understand that sometimes renting is actually a better option for them. But I'm a little worried about it too. I agree with Kate, like where the market is right now. Houses in Easthampton are going for like 45 grand over the asking price. And so what's someone going to be able to buy? First of all, they're going to be able to buy something that's going to need a lot of work. And I feel like that income group is so strapped already. I don't know. I mean, I just am worried about that piece. And I could make the argument, I feel like we could make the argument to the CPA, like actually the personal finance counseling and the first time home buyer counseling are all super valid at this point. And we'd like to, at some point, work with Valley to do these kind of grants using our CPA money, but not sure this is the time to do it. I don't know. Jana, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is sort of the same. We had these same thoughts, last time, which is about the market. And I guess I'm worried that it will not be successful because it will be so hard to find a property. Stuff goes in days over asking price. And I think we all hope that that's going to change at some point. So, I mean, I'm just going back to, Peter, your first statement, which is you'd rather do it right than do it now. And so I just feel like maybe now isn't the right time to do down payment assistance. But I agree with Jackie. I feel like we can make a compelling reason why the counseling is important. And then I just leave it up to you to decide if you want to apply for that now, or you'd rather just wait and apply for the whole package, maybe, in a year, depending on what the market's doing.
Yes, I think those points are well taken. I would point out that this is a program that would run over an 18-month period. So, the market is particularly hiccupy right now and has been for most of this past year. Some of that is, there was a bunch of flurry of stuff with COVID. Will it settle down? If it doesn't, then we're saddled with this. As I say, we would be perfectly content if you guys would help us make a pitch for the housing and counseling piece. And Jackie, I know you have a great history with that. So if you would stand up as members of the community and say that this is a valuable way to support affordable housing in the community, we would be absolutely fine with working with Easthampton residents to prepare them to buy a house. If during the course of that time period they can find sources from other places, we'd be fine with that. The mortgage, I think, yeah. So I think it is a very tricky time. It is a very tricky time in the real estate market to be trying to figure out how to get people into first-time purchases, because, as you say, you look at something that's 280 and the next thing you know, it's sold for 320 or 315, and you just go, gosh, it's a pretty crazy time. That's likely to calm down. It almost always has in my lifetime, but how long that takes and whether that stays hot like that for another 12 months and we can't actually get anybody into it, we might be better off to take the approach that we're going to solidly go after the $68,000 worth of first-time homebuyer counseling support that we had done in the middle of things. Does that make sense to people?
I have a crazy thought, which is, I'm good at these. Jana's laughing. What if What if you put a proposal before the CPA that said, here's what we'd like to do, and we're concerned about the ability, like with the home buyer, the down payment assistance in it, with the caveat that, you know, we've had this conversation, we're concerned about whether this is going to work or not, and we want your advice, CPA, like, we can go with or without this. We think eventually it'll be a good idea. We would like to offer down payment assistance. And I think I can tell you that that's something the mayor is for sure in support of too, if that's helpful to know. But maybe ask them, like, would you be willing to support this at this time? Do you think we should ask for it later? Regardless, we know that first-time homebuyer counseling and financial counseling helps people stabilize in their current living situations.
I'm not sure exactly how your CPA funds get sort of pushed around in Amherst, but I mean, in Easthampton, but in Amherst, they weren't spent, the funds weren't spent unless you had the situation arise where they would be spent. In other words, even if we had a $75,000 kitty and we couldn't find any buyers that could find a house during that 18-month period, those funds would revert to the CPA. They wouldn't be spent. It's not that money goes, the money doesn't go to Valley for us to dole out. It's only used if in fact we find houses that the people could purchase. And there the danger would be that we would somehow, and I don't think Donna or Valley would ever try to get someone into a house that they thought was either overpriced or beyond there. I mean, we're very careful about that kind of thing because we don't want to set somebody up for failure. So, you know, that would be an important component of it. And I don't know that it's problematic, Jackie, to go back to the CPA and say, well, you know, the housing partnership is obviously supportive of getting people into first-time home ownership. And we have a great and robust program to do that with counseling, but we also have this option and ask, you know, what are we gonna lose, another month in the process by doing that? I'm just not sure how. And Jamie, maybe you know more about whether CPA likes to be consulted before they get a final proposal, or would they rather just not answer those kinds of hard questions? They may just kick it back to the partnership and go, no, you guys tell us what you want to do.
I think that with the CPA, it's a little bit, if you ask them to make the decision for you, we may end up with a decision that we don't want. And I think it makes the best sense to bring the project to them that has the best chance of success, and not bring them, well, we could do this or that, you decide, because really they're going to look at Valley as the expert and the housing partnership as the experts to say, you know, tell us what we should be doing. We're not the experts. We just make the financial, does this make financial sense? So and you know, you may open up a discussion that there's where they start disagreeing with themselves over, you know, a few members think it's a good idea, a few members think it's not a great idea, and then you just end up spinning your wheels at the CPA level. So I guess I'd recommend that whatever, you know, bring something to them, and then if they deny it, then come back with an amended application, you know, a few months later. But I do think that whatever program comes with a recommendation from the housing partnership is going to carry a lot of weight to the committee, to the CPA committee. I also think that the CPA committee is concerned about, well, they are concerned about, you know, home ownership, getting people in first-time home buyer. I think their concern is more, the way I've heard them talk about housing is always more related to the SHI and trying to increase the number of permanently deed restricted affordable units. And so they're going, with any housing subsidy program, they're going to ask questions about length of affordability. Will these count to the SHI? And typically, you know, the $25,000 subsidy is not going to be enough to create deed restricted affordable housing. So they may balk at that where where a small number of residents get a large value, but the city doesn't get something in return for what,
That's a fair argument, Jamie. I think that's a fair argument. I wouldn't say I agree with every aspect of it, but I can see how that argument can be made. It's also, I mean, I think there are a number of things on the horizon in Easthampton that will add to the SHI. And so if they want to put $75,000 aside for a multi-unit project and reserve it, we'd also be content with that. So, my general sense, without beating this horse to death, is that we ought to go to the CPA. My sense is that you guys could strongly support a proposal where we did counseling for Easthampton residents for first-time home buyer counseling programs and help people stabilize their housing by understanding their budgets and understanding their debt to income ratio and all that kind of stuff. That's a proposal that you could support at the CPA without reservation. Is that my sense?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm also talking myself back into the 3 down payment assistance grants for $25,000 over, knowing that it's over an 18-month period and who knows what the market's going to do. So I don't know. I don't think it's a horrible idea to do, the highest and best ask. And if, like Jamie was saying, if they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that, then we come back to them without the down payment assistance, maybe. Anyway.
I'm just going to add a couple of things, and I probably should be keeping my mouth shut, but I can't because you know who I am. So there's just 2 things I just want to say that are just bigger policy things, not specific to the application and not specific to CPA. But one, down payment assistance in this sort of form sort of often replaces what many of us have had the advantage of parents who have been able to give us down payment assistance. And if there's an individual who doesn't have that family member who is able to give them down payment assistance, this is a program that provides that. So even if there's concerns with the market, I think it's important to remember how we all got into our houses, because I didn't do it on my own. Right. So I think it's important to understand that there are people who don't have resources, and this is one way to get there. Yeah. Secondly, when it comes to the deed restriction for home ownership, I think it's there's a very interesting program that I think people should look into and just understand putting deed restriction on home ownership projects and how that limits a family's ability to gain equity and intergenerational wealth. And so, I think by the city requiring deed restrictions for an extended period of time prohibits a family from being able to get that wealth that, again, we all have the benefit of being able to do in our homes. So those are just 2 big policy things that I just want the partnership to think about as they're, as you're talking big policy and talking about these issues in general.
So I will say, Jackie, I'm leaning towards what you're saying. My biggest concern is actually, it's a little bit what Peter is saying, just about, it has to do with the equity, that even if someone's going to be staying for a very long time, if you don't have enough equity, you can't refinance to get the repairs made. So I don't know. I don't want to be micromanaging, and put something in there, but that's really my biggest concern, right? That someone has an upside down loan, that then they don't have enough equity to leverage their home ownership to make the repairs. And
that's a super important point, actually. We would need to work out with the city how they want to approach what happens to the subsidy over the course of the ownership. And we've done it a number of different ways in different communities. Sometimes we have a graduated kind of thing where in the first 15 years of ownership, they would have to pay back some of the $25,000 if they sell. After 15 years, it gets reduced. Sometimes we've just made it a subsidy that never has to be paid back. That is basically a grant, not a loan. so that would need to be worked out with the city. And I don't know whether, I mean, we could figure out a proposal of how to do that if we submit it to the CPA. I would want some thinking from this group about what do you think would be the best avenue to do that? Does the CPA want to try and recapture that money at some point and have it go back in so it can benefit other households? Would the CPA be content to basically write it off and make it a grant rather than a deferred payment loan or something? And we've done it both ways. $25,000 isn't a lot. It's very helpful. And just as Jessica said, many of us probably benefited from that, from the bank of mom and pop.
I would just add that I don't believe the CPA is interested in trying to recapture a small amount of funds 15 years from now. But I would say that they would be interested in making sure that that people don't come into the program and use it as some way to prohibit it's an anti-speculation clause. So that way, if maybe after 5 years or something, I don't know what that would be, but I think their concern would be stopping someone from taking advantage of the program who doesn't actually need it, and as opposed to
first of all, they have to be income qualified, and then I think putting something on a kind of a 5-year rider on the thing, that if in that time period they sell a house, then you need to give that $25,000 back. A relatively short period of time. We could. I think there's ways that it could be structured, because the last thing you want is somebody buying a place, putting some of their own sweat equity into it and flipping it 3 years later and taking the city's $25,000 and sticking it in their pocket. I mean, it sounds nasty, but on the other hand, that's kind of the way. But I think that would make some sense to put some kind of a shorter time limit where it would have to get repaid back out of the proceeds of the house. It would give people pause to think about whether they actually wanted to sell.
So I know, Jackie, I agree, 5 years. I guess we're somewhat lucky that Brad isn't here tonight, because I know he virulently objects to this. But I must say that, I lean towards it particularly, and I think you could sell it more. I mean, again, my biggest concern has to do with the upside down mortgage, and not just the equity that you're talking about, Peter, but let's say a year in, the market is still high, you need to do some repairs, and now you can't refund, you know what I mean? Because it's still too high, and you, but I think with really good financial counseling from you guys, so you'd want to highlight that in the CPA as well, which is, we're not gonna, if a place needs this much repair, we would be about, and I think you guys have to approve it. Is that part of, so let's say there's a disagreement.
We have to be acceptable to us as well, I think. I'm not sure whether technically we have a no-go, but we're steering people towards properties that they can get financed, that aren't in terrible shape, that don't need a ton of immediate work. And then we're trying to advise people about how to save for those things that do, a roof repair. So we're pretty careful about, because we want people to be successful. We don't want to get them into a house and then have it go all to hell on them because we weren't thoughtful about it. So Donna's very, very careful about that.
And
would it be possible?
So the last time we ran this program, there was a very long checklist of documentation that that Donna collected and then was passed along to the city. But amongst that, you can't waive on an inspection, and the inspection is going to turn up things that would, obviously have to be negotiated. But
I can tell you from my experience as Hilltown CDC's home buyer counselor back a long time ago, how hard it was to give out $6,000 down payment assistance grants because of, at that time, lead paint laws and, just all of these things. It was actually really hard to give those grants. I'm hoping some of that feels a little easier now, but
it wasn't the last time.
Yeah, it's hard.
Still a But again, I think that it would be important to make the point to CPA that none of this grant money goes out unless we have a client who qualifies on every front. The checklist that you referred to is every box is checked and they qualify on every step, and then that's available to them. And I think that would be important to, if we decide we want to do it as a kind of a package deal with the counseling and the mortgage subsidies, to make sure that CPA understood that we were only using the subsidies for people who are qualified on every front, and that I hate to say it, but it is possible that we may do one of those in 18 months because of the various in the market, the people that we work with. But in any case, we still get if we don't use the 75,000, that stays in the pot, and we use the other money for the counseling, and it gets done. But then we have feels like we would have it in our toolkit if we can make the pitch to CPA adequately and completely. Then it's something in our toolbox to be able to actually get somebody into home ownership. So if that were the case, then I think as long as we're clear that we're not using it unless the people are really going to be able to benefit from it.
Yeah, I think
My
that's
one
really
thing that
clear, yeah. That's just, I think that's a really clear argument to make, and really, and I would just say, sometimes less is more. So like when we're talking about this at CPA, just being really, because I said this to you on the phone, Peter, but I feel like last time Donna sort of talked us out of approving the project. Like we got to a point where we were like, this sounds terrible. The market's terrible. Like this, why would we say yes to this? So I think it's just being very concise in the comments, so that, because the CPA will get confused and they will latch on as soon as there's a contradiction, they will latch on to that contradiction. So I just want it to be a successful presentation so that they know what we're proposing and that they feel good about it. They're not confused.
I am asking though for one thing, and I'm channeling Brad too, because we both had a similar concern. And though this is a little bit against what Jessica's saying, luckily I didn't have mom and pa give me any money for my house, but because I don't think most people require this, but I do think it would be helpful. I realize it's a little paternalistic, but to address this concern that the CPA might not have, but that Valley CDC for this 25 grand just gives a thumbs up that they've reviewed, that it's sustainable, that it's like something that their budget is matching. Because I do know that these grants are really hard to give out. And you might have someone that, by the time they check off all the boxes and they get it, I mean, again, my hope is just like, I just want it to work, and I don't want someone to get foreclosed upon. I don't want them to get condemned. I don't want them to live in something that's that they can't then refinance. So I'm wondering if that would be what other people think about that. And if so, if that would be, the 5 years, staying here if you want it as a grant, and then just something where like Donna says, it's doable. Just so that we're not, in our effort to be kind-hearted people, we're not setting people up in some other way.
Absolutely. That's the last thing we want to do either. We want people to be successful in it, and we want people to benefit from it for the long term, not suddenly find that, we're not talking anybody into anything on that front, particularly. That's important to us too, as well, Kate. So, I'm Kate, I'm in the same, just for what it's worth, I'm in the same camp you are. I didn't have Bank of Mom and Pop either. I put all $8,000 I had saved in 1979 into my first house. So not everybody does, but these days, what does a young person do? Buying a house for $250,000, and they're supposed to have a $50,000 down payment ready to go get a conventional mortgage? It's crazy. Anyway, I digress.
PMI, or you get stuck with PMI.
Or you end up with PMI, which is like, oh, what a, yeah. Yeah. So I like packaging it up to the CPA in a way that makes it possible for 3 people potentially to get into homes with the right kind of counseling, the right advice, and the right package. Jamie, are you sticking your head down because you're?
I was just writing down some notes.
Okay. I just wonder if that's generally the sense of folks, then we'll put something together. We'll put something together that that addresses all of these things. And then I guess it's a question of, but let me check and see if that's in fact what you think would make some sense.
I think so. And I think if you do that, Peter, I don't know how other people think. I don't think you need to come back to us again. I think if you send that to Jamie, we could decide tonight that we're willing to write a support letter for that. And then you could move forward. Like, we don't need to wait till November and then prolong it even further.
Move that along. We'll make it clear in the proposal that there are some safeguards on various fronts. Let me talk that through with Don and the rest of the staff about how we do that compared to other programs we've done. And we'll go from there. And then I'll get that to Jamie. You guys can then either, review it electronically, write a letter of support. And it would be really helpful if some of you could be present at that CPA meeting, because your voices as residents of the city will make more impact than mine. But just saying. Okay.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you so much for the time. Very helpful.
Peter,
Yes, thanks for coming.
did we have any buyers in our last grant? We didn't, right? Just for the CPA meeting. Do we have any successful residents of this program? I know we've done this before, but I don't think we've done any.
So we had, in 2016, we did five $7,500 grants. 3 of them went really quickly. The 4th one took a long time. The 5th one, we got someone in there, and then they wanted a variable rate mortgage. So then they ended up, they got kicked out of the program, like after going through all of the work. And then finally we got the 5th, a 6th one, but actually the 5th grant. And then 6 months later, after the person bought the house, they took a new job and they had to move to like California, and they ended up repaying everything. So we got, so it was sort of like it was a mixed bag. The $7,500 was not quite enough to really, I mean, it clearly helped 4 people, 5 people, but it was not, it was really hard to find the houses that were in those range. And I guess I could go and look back, but I get the feeling that most of these homeowners were in the 80% range rather than the lower range. So I think that might be helpful to understand for CPA is like, with a $25,000 subsidy, where does that, with like the average sale prices, does that make it affordable for someone who's making 60% AMI, or is that only going to be working for people who are just on the edge of not even being allowed into the program?
Well, I think we'll put together some understandable spreadsheets, Jamie, that we can build a case for what kind of folks we can help with this. I think that would make sense to look at some real numbers.
Yeah.
Jack probably do those for us, in his time.
But also, it is very easy to overcomplicate it. And the CPA is not housing. And there are a number of people on the CPA who have a lot of experience with housing, but enough to really get things confused.
To answer that question. Okay. Great. Is there more? I
think we're good.
Good. So thank you, Jamie. I'll give me it probably be early next week by the time I get something to you. I gotta build something with Donna and the staff, and then we'll get you a package that makes sense, and we'll get around.
Yeah. So the next CPA meeting is November 18th, and then the following one is December 16th.
I think we'll probably be at the December meeting.
Great.
And my apologies if I didn't know the answer to that question about our previous program. I've been the interim ED since June, so I'm not as intimately familiar with the history as say either Donna or Joanne Campbell would have been, but I appreciate your time tonight.
Great. Thank you, Peter.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and leave the meeting since
That's totally
great. Thanks very much for your help. We'll be in touch.
okay. Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye.
All right, let me just look at the agenda. So one thing that we skipped over because we didn't have a quorum was just approving the minutes from September. Did folks have a chance to look at the minutes that Brad sent? Did they all look fine to everyone?
Motion to approve the minutes from the September meeting.
I second that motion.
All right. All those in favor, Jana, aye. Jackie's aye.
Jade, aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at 7:08, I know that Jackie would like to watch the debate. I wouldn't mind watching the debate also. Left on the agenda is just talking about Arpa advocacy updates. We could table Arpa to, there's not much to say. I could briefly say what I know about Arpa, or we could table it to next meeting. Jackie, did you want to say something?
I can also briefly say, so you go first and then I'll fill in if I have any more from my conversations.
So again, this is something else that Jeff and Jamie and I talked about a few weeks ago when we met. And Jeff explained that unlike Amherst, thank you for sending that presentation, Kate, who, had this 12 different groups that they talked to and all this, of course, Amherst does everything like Amherst. But in Easthampton, it seems like the priorities for Arpa, which are still, again, Arpa itself, I think is still sort of unknown of when it's coming and all that. The mayor has been her priorities are things that were already in the works. This is how I understood the conversation. It didn't seem like there was much room for new priorities. She had established the priorities based on projects that were already either in process or on the plans to be in process. I know Jackie, you had more to say.
I just want to say, my understanding is that the rules for how ARPA funding can be spent are changing all the time. And so I think part of it is, it sounds like what's happening is the city's going to go with what they have in place now and then see what the changes look like, knowing that affordable housing is high on this mayor's list of things. And so it sounds like there might be some opportunities later.
Great, that's helpful. Okay, we could talk about this more at another meeting if we want to talk about what we think some additional priorities should be. But I think, if our priorities are affordable housing and the mayor's priorities are affordable housing, I think we're on the same page, which is nice. And, we may have projects on the horizon. So if we can use ARPA funding for any of those projects that are, on the horizon, that would also be great. Does anyone have anything else they want to add about this? Kate?
I'm wondering if, I'll just throw it out there. I think part of the confusing thing, and I know, Jackie, you want to go see the debate, but I just think that the rules make it really hard. The changing rules about ARPA is what makes it, I think, the hardest. Because I don't see any harm, although our process will not be as nice and inclusive as they really did a thing. But to be quite honest, why can't we be more explicit about our affordable housing goals? You know what I mean? I think you only get dream big, maybe you get it. So I just think that there might be some, the problem being, I don't even know how to do it with the changing rules about. Well,
I think that our priorities are laid out in the housing production plan and the recommendations from that. And those are also the priorities of the mayor and the city council. If there's anything more specific, I don't think it would hurt to have a little memo that says, here's the stuff that we're thinking about,
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You just married the two, assuming it's because what I was a little confused about the Amherst proposal, just because DMH is getting some ARPA funds too. And there is a prohibition on and I don't understand it. So on the purchase or long-term lease of land for the DMH one. So that's a pretty big restriction, and it wasn't listed in the, but I guess all I'm saying is, why not highlight those things and marry it together and say, we would love purchase more affordable housing. I don't know.
Well,
Want to
maybe,
talk about this at the November meeting where we have a
Yeah.
little bit more time,
Let's do it.
which I think the November meeting is on Thanksgiving.
so maybe we make it the week before.
So maybe we'd want to reschedule that. I mean, I don't know what people's Thanksgiving plans are, but I don't plan to be at a
I'm
meeting.
not available on Thanksgiving.
Could we meet on the 18th?
CPA.
No.
But Jackie,
Oh,
can I just ask you for clarification on the changingness of it? So I was looking, I mean, because I look at Amherst for everything as like, that was what they put in their presentation, that was like the new God rules. But you're saying it keeps changing the rules.
That's my understanding. And Jamie was also nodding when I said that. So
Yeah.
she probably has more.
I don't, because I started paying attention to it and then it kept
Couldn't
changing and I wasn't being asked to contribute. So it was hard to keep like
It
this is
wasn't
what they're currently at. So
Yeah.
I mean, I do know that, a lot of it has to do with having qualified census tracts or census tracts that have predominantly low mod income.
And I know that that's something that our mayor is trying to push back on because it doesn't work that way in Easthampton. Like we don't have, that's why the CDBG money was so challenging because we were supposed to it only goes to this one, crappy neighborhood. Well, no, it's like poverty is spread out around the city. So, anyway, I will get off my soapbox now.
But yeah, maybe next meeting, what we can do is just look at just go back and look at the,
Priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to go big picture on you, and I would encourage you to keep an eye on what the State House is doing, because they have set aside $600 million for housing, and they have specific categories that they're looking at. So above and beyond the 4.7 million that Easthampton's going to get in their local allocation, there is state housing money to be out there. And the word on the street that we are hearing is that there are going to be gobs of money for housing projects, and there's not enough housing projects to feed the money. So I would highly encourage you to, as Kate said, maybe think beyond what you've already set into place and to start thinking about maybe some bigger projects that if there is gobs of money that they're saying there's going to be, and there's going to be not enough projects for that money to go to, that you have a list above and beyond what you already have.
And Jessica, are you aware? Can you buy tracts of land? Like I would love the Cernak plot to go to. I know you guys are doing. You guys are figuring out where we would purchase, but can you use it? Are you familiar? Do you know if you can use these gobs of money for the purchase of land? Or you're
I
not
don't know.
sure?
I think they're still figuring that stuff out.
Yeah.
But as it's being set aside, is there's $100 million going to the Commonwealth Builders Program. There's this amount of money that's going to be going for projects to be divvied out under as soft debt to support tax credit programs. So there's already been some preliminary set asides that the House bill is already discussing. And I think this is where the advocacy part comes in from either the administration level and the housing partnership level of this is why this money needs to be going to housing production. I feel like at this point, it's still at that big level. We need to be advocating to make sure that $600 million doesn't shrink down to $300 million, and that there isn't other programs that are going to pull from that ARPA. So I think really right now, it's just affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing. These are what the needs are. This is what the needs are in the community. These are the types of projects that we need support building. I don't know whether it can go to land acquisition. I know that Amherst is talking about very specific tracts of land that are in QCTs for that money to go to. And there's projects that we are aware of. So, there is lots of parcels that are for sale. They're also very expensive. So, this is where, what's a QCT? A QCT is a qualified census tract, and it's a HUD designated area. So in Valley Service region, there's only one, and it's in Amherst. So this is, the money is being divvied out in a very specific way, and this is where the advocacy part can come into play. So I would just encourage you to sort of take a look and to see, is there things that you should be advocating for so that you can have access to these funds that you may not have access to now?
All right, so let's figure out when we're going to meet next, because we're not going to meet on Thanksgiving. We can't meet on the 18th. Could we meet on the 16th or the 17th?
Let me check. I have to see if that gets in the way of my community action board meeting, Jana.
That's not on my
It's fine with
calendar.
me.
I'm just checking that, see if there's any other, there's a 5 o'clock meeting on the 17th.
They all gonna want to watch the debate. They don't want to listen to me talk about this, so.
So there's a 5 o'clock meeting on the 17th, but the 16th and the 17th otherwise look open from the planning department Zoom and for my schedule.
Did you say either one was fine?
If it starts at 6, then that should be fine on either day.
And I-
Jessica, are you possibly around for either of those?
Who?
I know, Jessica, you're not on the board, but you would be a great contribution to our ARPA discussion if you
Do
are
you
around.
really want me?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to speak for the group, but yeah.
I will be available for whenever you guys decide. I am available and I will listen and try not to talk.
No, but I think it's really helpful for these kind of big political things. I have someone at my organization that does it, where it's really hard to figure out, like you can dream big, but if you're dreaming about the wrong thing, like again, I'm dreaming about land acquisition and I don't think it's the right thing to dream about. So
Well, I would, I think the planning department is really the one that's gonna, and then the mayor needs to set the priorities. And, I'm just here to say, just keep an eye on what's happening at the state level, that there is more money than the slog and it's not a huge slog. I mean, Amherst doesn't get, Easthampton's not getting a huge amount compared to other communities,
Right.
but there's more money to be had. And just the chatter that we're hearing is there's going to be tons of money for housing projects. So get your stuff lined up, because this may be the one and only chance to get this stuff done. Because once the slog comes, there could be nothing for years.
Right.
So that's all. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. So I'm available to whatever you guys decide. If you
well,
want.
and I know you guys want to go watch a debate, we can totally end, but I'm even just thinking about, remember how we had that, they were looking for kind of I don't remember, it was someone came.
Sorry.
Oh, do you remember someone came to talk to us? It was not condo, but community living for elderly folks.
Oh, yeah.
There's a community land trust based in the Midwest somewhere.
Was
And
it
they have,
Senior living, they were looking at the schools. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know. Okay. Anyone, so I don't think we can't schedule because Jackie needs to look into it. Can we, is this something we?
know if the 16th or the 17th work?
The 16th and 17th work for me. The 17th, there's a 5 o'clock meeting on the 17th. So
I think I can't do the Tuesday, so I think I would prefer the Wednesday, but that might be, isn't that city council? No?
1st and 3rd is city, yeah, so that'd be city council.
Which is, it doesn't matter. We're on Zoom, so.
All right. So can we do the 17th at 6?
Yeah,
Or is that too early, Jamie? Do you have another meeting at 5?
I have a meeting at 5. It usually wraps up by 6. I don't think that there's going to be a ton on the agenda. So
We could do 6:30. I don't care.
That works too.
All right. Why don't we do the 17th at 6:30?
Okay.
Okay. I'm just writing this down on my calendar. I will email everybody out.
Jana, do you want to invite Jeff or the mayor to that discussion, or do you want to try to talk to them beforehand? Do you want?
I think we should talk first.
That's what I kind of think.
About
too,
our
yeah.
plans, then invite them.
Okay.
And I think that there's a lot of stuff kind of floating around out there that we should get together and talk about, definitely, with the mayor and Jeff.
helpful for us to just like have a conversation with each other about like, what do we think? Like, you know, look into it a little bit more. And then I think could be bringing in Jeff and the mayor to say, here's what we're thinking. You know, what do you think?
And what are you thinking?
What are you thinking? How can we work together? What's helpful to you? What can we do to support your requests?
Mhm.
You know, so I think we should talk first. I agree. Okay. So we got through everything on our agenda.
Christmas- We can invite them to our Christmas party if one of them will bring the shrimp. Sorry, holiday party.
I know, but we can't do it in person. We can like meet in my garage maybe.
Anyway.
Okay. So
Jess
Jess is doing thumbs up to meeting in my garage. All right. I think we got through a lot today, which was great. Thank you for everybody. I will send out and let everyone know the meeting's been rescheduled from Thanksgiving. And I think we're good. Yeah.
Motion.
Oh, do you have a motion to
Making a
adjourn?
motion.
Okay. What time is
Hey,
it?
you want to second that emotion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm seconding that emotion, not the motion, but the emotion. No, I'm seconding the motion.
All right. All those in favor to adjourn?
Yes.
Bye.
Yes. All right. It is 7:24.
Enjoy.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.